This is Big Podcast.
Something that I've noticed once I started putting a message out into the world, and this is through books, blogs, email, podcasting, this is going to happen to you if it hasn't already. You put your message out, and for me, it's about marketing via podcasting. It's about marketing your podcast. And when you do that, whatever it is, people will come to you and ask you about other things. They think, oh, he's good at this area. He must be good at this area. For example, let's say you're talking about weight loss. You're going to have people come and ask you about relationships. Or if you're talking about money, they're going to ask you about weight loss or fitness. Or maybe relationships. People assume that if you've got one area of your life together, or you know about one thing, you're going to know other things. And you're going to have other elements of your life together. Anyway, we're going to get into that. It's Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. If you want to grow your podcast, if you want to make a podcast that people care about, if you want to make money with your podcast, you are in the right place. The website is bigpodcast.com. Every Friday morning, New York time, I send out a newsletter that is called Big Podcast Insider. You can find it at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 193. This is what I'm going to cover. What do you use for blank? This will make your podcast better. Yes, but will somebody actually listen to your podcast? Podcast hosting, $49 for life. Good deal? Yeah, maybe. We're going to get into it. The workaholic. Also some classified ads, things that will help you to grow a podcast, build a better podcast, make a podcast that people care about. The things that this podcast is about. This episode of Build a Big Podcast brought to you by Riverside.fm, a virtual studio that makes recording and editing at the highest quality possible, accessible to anyone. You want to have that authority where when people think, oh, this guy's got this one element together, he must have other elements of his life together. Yeah, you're going to want Riverside. You know, part of that judgment, it's not what you say, but it's how it's being said. You are being judged on the quality of your audio. So no matter how good your content is, if your audio quality isn't good, they're going to turn it off. They're not even going to listen to the words you're speaking. But if you've got that good quality and you've got some pretty good words, people are going to pay attention. You can do it with Riverside.fm. Not only let them hear your words, but let them see your words as well. It's got AI transcription with 99% accuracy. And this is with more than 100 languages. So it's French, Spanish, Hindi, whatever you got, man. Riverside.fm can handle it. You can also edit your audio, and if you're doing video, edit your video as easily as editing text. Riverside.fm has some great tools for you to record, edit, and publish your podcast if you want to check it out, and you do. Here's how to do it for free. They're going to give you a couple of hours. You're going to be able to get in there, get an interview or two, record a couple of episodes, see how you like it, kick the tires, look under the hood. Go to Riverside.fm, get your free account. If you want to stick around, this is the discount code to get 15% off. The discount code BIGPODCAST, BIGPODCAST. That's Riverside.fm. Get your free account. Take a look at it. If you want to stick around, 15% off with the code BIGPODCAST, BIGPODCAST. Hey, you know how we do it. I go from thing to thing to thing. I've already listed those things. I'm going to go through them one after another. They're all about podcasting, all about growing your podcast, all about making money with your podcast and delivering a message that has impact. When I go from thing to thing to thing, you are going to hear this sound. That's how you know I'm going to the next thing. And that's how you know that if you want more information on what I'm talking about, you want all the links of everything that I'm talking about, go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 193. Ready? Here we go. What do you use for blank? The most common podcasting question that I'm asked, it's not about marketing. That's what I wish it was. Yeah, that's my business, man. I can help you with that. It's not about growing an audience. It's what do you use for blank? And now sometimes that is about marketing. It is for growing an audience. What do you use for this or that? But most of the time, what people want to know is the equipment that I'm using. What kind of mic do I use? What's in the studio? I've talked about where I record. It's a 5x8 closet. Well, it used to be a closet. Now it's my studio. It's actually a room within a room. I've got some padding, foam squares you'll sometimes see in studios. And on top of that, the rock wool. Anyway, without getting technical, what's happening is the energy of my voice, the sound waves, go into the rock wool. It's absorbed. If it's not absorbed and it goes out the other side of the rock wool, there's a little bitty gap and there's some foam on the other end. Bottom line, a pretty dead room. That's where I record. It's nothing fancy, but it is a dedicated space. And I think whether you're doing something in the corner of your office or you've got a dedicated office or a dedicated type studio for your podcast, that is the best way to do it. I know a lot of people, and I understand why people would do this. You set up your equipment and you take it down. You set up your equipment and you take it down. I love having a dedicated space in which to do my work. It helps me get into the mood of doing my work. When I walk into the closet, I'm ready. Sometimes I don't feel like I'm ready, but I hit record on my system. And I'm going to get into the specific tools that I use, hardware and software, to let you know what I'm hitting record on in just a second. And when I hit record, boom, I get into that mindset. Hey, it's David Hooper from Big Podcast. Here we go. Get into character, basically. That is helpful. You can do it in a temporary space. Look, the bottom line is you need to get your podcast out. So use what you've got. It helps me. And I've found that it helps most of the podcasters that I work with to have that dedicated space. All right, let's get into the specifics. The mic that I use, an RE20 by Electro Voice. All these things, by the way, linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 193. RE20, I think it's $450 right now. This is the number one broadcast mic with the Shure SM7B. That's a mic that you see a lot of people using. You're going to see one of those two mics in a broadcast radio studio. Do you need it? No, you don't. These Audio-Technica USB mics, the Samsung USB mics, they are fine. What you want is a mic that you're using. Don't get too caught up in the mic, but it's a nice mic, an RE20 by Electro Voice. The interface that I use is a Scarlett 4i4 by Focusrite. Those are the red boxes that you see. More or less everybody's got them, it seems like. I know they sold about 1 million of them. The 2i2 is the most common, which lets you have two inputs. There's a solo version if you're just doing a solo podcast. The reason that I've got the 4i4, without getting too technical, I needed different types of outputs. One of them for my headphones. I've got a different mix in my headphones than I have for the second mix that I have, which goes into my portable recorder. That is important. I've got a backup recorder. I use the Zoom F3. F is field. It's a field recorder, 32-bit float. It's a 2-channel box. And I mean box, probably 3x3x2. It is very small. 32-bit float. It's got one button on it, record. No levels, nothing like that. I mean, maybe some software levels. I don't know. I've never set anything. I just hit record. It's good to go. It's a backup. You want a backup recorder. This one's under $300. Amazon will sometimes put it on sale for, low twos. If you want to see it, it's linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Zoom is great stuff for backup recorders. And number 4 and number 5, I use 2 pieces of software. I record into Audacity. I know I can hear the groans. I've used it for 20 years. To me, it is the most empowering piece of software that we have as podcasters. It is free. It is open source. The new version, 3.6.1, was just released. It is fast and it is very powerful. It is everything you need to record your podcast. A wave is a wave is a wave. You do not need Pro Tools. You do not need Adobe Audition. Can I use those? Yeah. I do. I use Pro Tools for the radio show. I've used Adobe Audition a lot. Reaper, all the main DAWs I have used, and I prefer Audacity. I record and edit with Audacity. For the polish, I use RX11. That was just released by Isotope. Again, if you want the links to all these, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Let's add these up. The mic, $450. The interface, I think it's about $300. So that's $750. The recorder is $300. So that's $1,050. Audacity is free. RX, I'm not sure what that is. I've got probably about $1,200 in what I just mentioned to you. I do have a couple of optional extras. I've got a mic activator, cloud lifter. You can get a generic cloud lifter under $100. The cloud lifter brand, $150. Also a channel strip. I use the DBX 286S. I just saw that for under $200. I think it was $169. I couldn't believe it. But that's about $200. So let's say you had $1,500 to put into your system, not including a computer. You could do it if you've got $100. This is what I would do. ATR 2100 or a Samson Q2U. Both of those are USB mics. If this matters to you, if you know about mics, they're knockoffs of the Shure SM58. They have XLR connections. So if you use something like the Scarlett interface that I'm using, they will work there. If you've got a computer that uses USB, you can connect it via USB. You don't need a lot of equipment to get going. Sometimes I think that's even more empowering. Like I said, I love audacity. If you're just getting started, the important thing is that you actually do the work that it takes to make a podcast. Don't worry about what you're using, but write, research, record, ask questions, listen, edit, publish. All this stuff is low cost. Back in the day, when I started, this is radio, not podcasting, but in the 90s, we were recording on magnetic tape. And quarter-inch tape, I don't remember how much the quarter-inch reels were, but you only had so much space there. They're doing, I think it was 7.5 inches per second or maybe 15 inches per second if you're going on the fast mode. The 2-inch tape that we used for music, 15 inches per second or 30 inches per second. And those reels were probably, $200. They were pricey. The quarter-inch reels, not as much, but think about that. Imagine if all the podcasts that you did, you had to buy magnetic tape for it. Not only that, but if you wanted to edit, a grease marker and a razor blade, that's going to cost you money too, and it's going to take you time. Might take a finger off. I don't want to get into the past. What I'm saying is I don't take the new stuff for granted. $1,000, $100, whatever your budget is, there's an opportunity for you. If you have a question about equipment, I want to get you podcasting, and I want to help you make a great podcast. You can reach out to me. I've got the links on how to do that via Mastodon, Blue Sky, or Threads. You will find them along with the links to everything that I'm using to record this episode at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Let's talk about Big Podcast Amp for a second. If you like the newsletter and you like the podcast, you're going to love Big Podcast Amp. That stands for Audio Monetization Program. I said a minute ago that I want to help you make a podcast. That's the first step. I also want to help you to get people to listen to your podcast, because people listening to your podcast is how we are going to change the world, how we're going to make it better, how we're going to add levity and happiness to people's lives, how we're going to help people. Sounds good? Big Podcast Amp is a personal coaching program that's going to do that. Grow your podcast audience, get people talking about your podcast to grow it even more, and get you to make money with your podcast and your podcasting skills. It is cheaper than you think. You can find more information at bigpodcast.com/amp. This will make your podcast better. Are you looking to improve your mental health? Sounds like a BetterHelp ad, doesn't it? That's a little inside joke for the podcasters. BetterHelp. The number one podcasting advertiser. But this is not a BetterHelp ad, although it may have the same result for you. I'm talking about digital minimalism. I never heard of this. I saw this at first. I thought about digital minimalism, and I thought about my equipment. Back in the day, I was talking about razor blades, grease pencils, magnetic tape, but we also had big mixers, and we had just a ton of stuff to get a podcast on tape. I mentioned 5 things for you, including the software. You can actually do it with 2, the mic and the software. You don't need the other things. That's what I was thinking when they were talking about minimalism. It's beyond that, though. This is something that's going to improve your mental health and improve your podcast. And this is the too long didn't read version of it. Nothing to do with your podcast, but everything to do with your podcast at the same time. It's touch grass, man. Get outside and live a life that people will be interested in hearing about. I've worked with hundreds of podcast hosts over the years, even more entertainers, many of them celebrities. The best have life experiences and stories to share. When you hear Bruce Springsteen write a song, or whoever your favorite songwriter is, your younger Billie Eilish maybe, Dua Lipa, whoever you like, you listen to them sing and you think, oh, that's me. I connect to that, or I'd like to be that. Maybe it's aspirational. Your listeners are thinking the same thing when they hear you. They're thinking, man, I wish I sounded that good on the mic. This guy's a great speaker. He's got these stories. He's living a life, man. Here's a question for you. Are you currently adding to both? Are you having life experiences and making memories, making stories to share? If not, don't get scared. What can you do to make yourself more interesting to listeners? Do some of those things, man. Life experiences, make memories, have stories to share. Do not let your best years and your podcast stories be behind you. Married with Children. You ever seen that show? Al Bundy. Peaked in high school. I used to live in a small town in Mississippi. There were those guys, high school legends. And you'd go out and they'd be holding court at the bar, talking about winning the state championship or something like that. And that's great. I don't want to take away from that. That can be an important part of somebody's life. But What are you doing now, man? We've got a long life. You don't want to peak out too soon. Don't write your memoir at 21 years old. Or if you do, live a life where you can write another one at 40, 60, 80. The best podcasters and the best podcasts share experiences and maybe lessons from those experiences. I promised in the print newsletter I was going to share an experience of, I was joking around about it being another day at the office, an experience involving jazz music and heroin. And this is really sad. This is something to look out for. I went to music school. I've got a degree in music. The music school that I went to, and this is fairly common for most traditional music schools, there was a classical side and there was a jazz side. And there was a guy, very nice guy. For whatever reason, he had bought into the stories that he had read about or myths or legends of the jazz guys that he really looked up to. And they would hang out in clubs and seedy motels and do drugs and, they were living the life. And he was out living the life. On one hand, what I just said is that you need to get out, touch grass, live a life, have interesting experiences. This actually made him a better musician. There were other guys that I went to school with. They would hang out in practice rooms all day. These little rooms, much like I'm in now, like a 5x8 room, and they would just practice scales or practice their pieces or practice charts or whatever they were practicing. This dude was in clubs actually learning how to connect to people. But he got into a problem with some of these extracurricular activities. And then hanging out, what was working for him stopped working for him. Something to think about. I'm not a Sunday school teacher. I'm not making judgments. I just want to see you put out a great podcast that touches people, that reaches people, that changes lives, makes the world better. To do that, you've got to be within the world, but you've also got to take care of yourself. And that's the theme of this. That's why I also talked about improving your mental health, digital minimalism. If you want this article, I've got it linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Yes. But will somebody actually listen to your podcast? You got a great idea for a podcast? We all do. I thought of 3 this morning. But will people actually care? That's the question. I've got an article for you on customer validation that you're going to find helpful for your podcasting efforts. And the TLDR for this is, hey, if people aren't going to pay you for what you're doing right now, literally hand you a credit card, hand you money, maybe they're not that interested. A lot of people say, oh, that's a good idea. Your mother definitely will. But are they actually going to listen? People try to be supportive of our ideas. They don't want to say, oh, that sucks. Or they don't have any idea. Oh, that sounds good. Are they actually going to invest in it? And it doesn't necessarily have to be money with podcasting. Maybe it's just time. Podcasts like this, relatively short. Rarely ever am I going over 30 minutes, maybe with one of the interviews that I do. Some of these podcasts, 2, 3 hours, 4 hours long. That is a lot of time that you're asking somebody to invest. But even 15, 20 minutes, that can also be a lot of time. So it can be good to validate ahead of time. If you want thoughts on how to do that, I've got them linked. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue number 193. I want to say this before I move on to the next thing, though. I want you to keep in mind that it's fine for you to do a podcast just for yourself or just for a few people. Not having a ton of people interested in your podcast does not mean that you do not have a great podcast. You simply got a podcast that isn't made for a ton of people. If you go to YouTube and you look at what's really hot on YouTube, outrage, somebody's pissed off about something. Somebody's pissed off about everything. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. And that's going to attract a lot of people. That is how the game is played. Outrage. Is an outrage video on YouTube that has 3 million views more helpful to society or even more helpful to any one individual than your podcast that shows people how to do something positive or that makes people feel better? I would argue no. So don't get too caught up in this, but I do want you to reach as many people as possible. This article will show you how to do it. I've got it linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. But do remember this, sometimes the You Do You podcast, they end up being the most profitable, even without a ton of listeners. You've probably heard me talk about Mike Stewart and his bug control podcast. This dude is helping people build pest control businesses. No episode has gotten more than 1,000 downloads. Yet, that back end that he's got, pretty profitable. Most people be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I would love to do that. I mean, it's no Call Her Daddy. It's not a $30 million contract or whatever she made on that. But it's a nice living. So don't let just a few people or you doing one thing that you really want to do and having people say, yeah, that's not that great, keep you from doing it if you want to. More thoughts on this, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 193. Podcast hosting, $49 for life. It's a great deal for podcasters. It's a company out of India. 20,000 podcasters are already using it. I am using it, although not with this podcast. Here's the deal. A $49 one-time payment. You get 8 episodes per month. You get unlimited podcasts. So if you've got 4 episodes per month, do 2 podcasts on this one account. Unlimited storage, bandwidth, and downloads, advanced analytics. They've got an embedded player, they've got a website, and they've got AI tools. There's a 60-day money-back guarantee on it. If you don't like it, get your money back. But it's $49, man. It's worth a punt. It's a good company. It's a good deal for podcasters. $49, pay it once. You've got hosting for life. I've got it linked. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue number 193. The workaholic. This is the mental health issue. I didn't plan it to be that way, but here we are. Had an interesting experience recently. I was talking daily routine stuff with a lady, and I mentioned work. And she said, every day? And I said, yeah. And she was shocked. That got me thinking, am I crazy? It's so common in the world that I live in. I was thinking it was normal. And maybe it is normal. Again, my world, entrepreneurs, creative people, podcasters, a lot of us work every day. We like what we do. And maybe there's more to it. Maybe we think we've got to work every day. You're on the content treadmill. Man, got to get them episodes out. Social media posts, blog posts, emails. It's easy to get on that. And I'm not judging you if you are. I've certainly been on that at times. Since this conversation, though, I've thought a lot more about hosts and producers, how we can take better care of ourselves. I recently had an experience with burnout that was quite scary. It was to the point that everything I had been doing no longer worked. And I don't know how to say it other than that. It was like, it just didn't work anymore. I don't know if you've ever been in a car accident or seen a car accident, seen the crash test dummies. And you've got this car, let's say it's going 60 miles an hour toward a brick wall. And boom, it just stops. Engine's dead, glass everywhere. It's like there's nothing there that will keep you rolling. And that's what this was like. And thinking about it, going through this is probably one of the reasons that this is about the third mental health related thing that I've mentioned within this newsletter issue. We have got to think about this if we're going to continue going. And I think it's weird. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier this morning. This guy's a football player. Used to be. Played for the Raiders. And I was talking to him about exercise and the tendency as we get older, especially, to overdo it. Specifically, we were talking about the kind of guys, and we've all worked out with them. He and I have. I don't know if you have. Maybe you're one of them. And this will sneak up on you. You get out there and you overdo it, run sprints up a hill or something. The next day you can't walk. My COVID workout was jumping rope, and I still do that. And I remember getting out, and I used to jump rope as a kid and post-college, so I knew a bit about it, and I can do it a bit. And I was having so much fun. I was like, oh, this is great. Felt like being a kid. No joke. I couldn't walk normally. My quads weren't firing for a couple weeks. I'd overdone it once. And this was really overdoing, and it was scary. That's what this burnout is like. You just overdo it, and you're having so much fun, and you're going in one direction that you don't see what's coming up behind you or to the side of you. And like that crash test dummy, boom, there's a wall. I think it can be easy to check out with workaholism, not any different than alcoholism or my friend who was on heroin. You just dull things. You keep busy. And the busier you are, the more noise there is. And if there's more noise that's trying to get your attention, you just turn your own volume up. So you get busier and busier and busier, or do more drugs or drink more, or whatever your thing is. Everybody's got a thing. We all have that one thing that we do when we're trying to avoid something else. I think the remedy is sometimes to step back, figure out something that's sustainable. If you're aware enough to feel like this is coming on, maybe just step off the gas just a little bit. Give yourself a break. Give yourself forgiveness. Take care of yourself first. Don't worry about listeners. And normally I'm a listener first guy. You'll hear me say that. It's for the listener. This isn't about you. This is about listeners, at least if you want people to listen. But you cannot take care of the listeners if you are not taking care of yourself. You are not a martyr. Listeners will understand. Let them know what is going on. Hey, I've got a 5-day-a-week podcast. I'm going to drop it down to 3. Or maybe you're dropping it down to 1. Or maybe you're taking the month off. I did this with my newsletter, extra.bigpodcast.com. Not this newsletter, Big Podcast Insider, and the audio version, which you're listening to now. But I've got a site at extra.bigpodcast.com. I was doing it 5 days a week. I said, I got to step back, man. Step back. Give myself a break. So I did. Nobody complained. We're not nearly as important as we think we are. And people will survive. And people will be patient, especially if you let them know what's going on. If you're interested in more thoughts on this, I've actually got a joke. You know, I put jokes in these newsletters. But like all good jokes, there's some truth to it. You can find it and also more thoughts on mental health and taking care of yourself at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 193. Classified ads for you. These are things that will help you to grow your podcast, make a better podcast, make a podcast that people care about, and make money with your podcast. Podpage. You need a website for your podcast. You need some place for people to go if they want to listen, subscribe, find out more information. Don't just say, wherever you get your podcast, it's where I am. No, man, don't leave it up to chance. Tell them where to go. Yourdomain.com, bigpodcast.com. That's where I am. And you can do something like that with Podpage. 25,000 podcasters have automatically created a beautiful listen-friendly podcast site via an RSS feed. It is so easy. You can be up and running 10, 15 minutes. If you want a really good site, edit it a little bit. 30 minutes, you're in and out. Seriously, the simplest way to create a podcast website. You can try it for free. I've got a link for you at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Hey, speaking of automation and the easy button, Cast Magic has automated episode notes. Over 35,000 podcasters have used Cast Magic to automate episode notes, highlight clips, podcast summaries, blog posts, social media posts. At the very beginning of this episode, a lot of people ask me, what do you do for blank? That's one of the common questions that I get. One of the common comments that I get is, I can't stand doing episode notes. Well, let Cast Magic make it easy on you. It's like having an assistant. You upload your podcast audio, boom. Instant episode notes. Do you need to edit them? Yeah, I do. But it's pretty good. You're going to be amazed by it. You can try it for free. I've got a special link for you at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Hey, when you're ready, here's how I can help you. I've talked about Big Podcast AMP, the audio monetization program. This is personalized coaching for indie podcasters to help you grow your podcast audience and build your authority, brand, and reputation. You want to make money, spread a message, help people. Help people. How good does that feel to make the world a better place? You can do it with your podcast, man. I believe in you. The power of audio, your voice into their ears. And the great thing about it is you can do the work once and it replicates. That's what this is about. You speaking once, 10 people get it, 100 people get it, 1,000 people get it, 10,000 people get it. It's no more work for you. If you want to know how to do it, I can help you. That's Big Podcast AMP, the audio monetization program. Making money and making an impact with your podcast and also your podcasting skills. You've got a lot of opportunities if you know how to speak. You can find more information at bigpodcast.com/amp. That's bigpodcast.com/AMP. Hey, you subscribe to this podcast? Let me show you how to do it. Like I said, you can't just say, hey, subscribe wherever you get podcasts. No, I'm not going to take a chance on that, man. I'm going to guide you through the process step by step. This is how to do it. bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Go there now before you forget. Also, if you want a subscription page for yourself, swipe it. Feel free to take it. Obviously, you're going to put your podcast in where mine is, Build a Big Podcast. You're going to see 3 buttons there, one for RSS, one for iPhone, one for Android. Click it once. You're going to be subscribed. It's that easy. You're never going to miss an episode. Every single one of them about growing your podcast, making a podcast people care about, making money with your podcast, and making a podcast that makes impact. Do it now at bigpodcast.com/subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode of Build a Big Podcast.